Manx Radio's update with Lewis Foster.
Well, Fastamai, good evening and welcome along to Updates on Manx Radio. It's 5 o'clock on Monday the 14th of April. Let's catch up after the weekend with half an hour of news on and from the Isle of Man. On the programme tonight, is it time for a referendum on plans for an offshore wind farm? We speak to the man behind a new petition gaining momentum online. And from wind power to fossil fuels, the Treasury Minister explains why he believes plans to drill for gas off the island's coast are, not yet, in his words, dead in the water. All that and more, plus business, weather and sport, and what to watch out for on the roads. Let us know your thoughts. Text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. But we'll start as always with the latest headlines with Siobhan Fletcher. Fastamai, Siobhan.
Fastamai. Police have confirmed inquiries are ongoing after a person was rescued by the RNLI following an incident in Peel yesterday. Just before 2 p.m, emergency services were called out to the breakwater with reports of a small vessel experiencing difficulties. The constabulary says the person is being treated at Nobles. A petitioner behind calls for a referendum on the Isle of Man's proposed wind farm says the issue is about public consent, not renewable energy. John Anslow argues the Manx public is being left out of major decisions like 20-mile-per-hour zones and the Liverpool ferry terminal.
It seems to me that more and more massive capital projects are being forced on us with no real opportunity for the electorate to comment.
A new mental health initiative is aiming to break the silence around emotional well-being in Manx farming. The Manx National Farmers Union launched Greener Grass, a support and signposting service designed to help those in the agricultural sector access mental health support more easily. The Treasury Minister says he's seen no further interest so far for gas exploration in Manx waters following the expiration of Kroger's licence earlier this year. Alex Allinson says he doesn't think the idea has completely vanished, but believes the world has changed.
Is anyone going to go in and spend the tens of millions of pounds to basically fund what could just be a speculative venture?
And a section of Newcastle Town Road is to temporarily close tomorrow evening. It will be shut to all traffic heading south from its junction at the Quarter Bridge to the track entrance of the NSC between 6 p.m. and 11:55 p.m, with a diversion available via Pulrose. Further afield, Birmingham's bin strike is going to drag on after refuse collectors rejected a new offer from the City Council. The Unite unions called the deal totally inadequate. A former parliamentary aide to Rishi Sunak, a Tory member of the Welsh Parliament, and a police officer are amongst 15 people charged with betting offences. And Sony has hiked the price of the PlayStation 5 by 25% as Donald Trump's tariffs hit the gaming industry. The digital edition of the console now costs £430. They're your headlines. I'll have your news at 6.
Gurulmayed. Thank you, Siobhan. Let's turn our attention now to the weather, brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Cloudy with outbreaks of light and patchy rain at times this evening and tonight. Light to moderate southerly wind and a minimum temperature of 6 degrees. Remaining cloudy tomorrow with the ongoing risk of light rain in the morning and afternoon, turning persistent and heavy later in the day and overnight into Wednesday. The light northwest wind will gradually increase fresh to strong throughout the day, maximum temperature of 11 degrees. Then heavy rain will continue at first on Wednesday, clearing late afternoon/early evening with some bright or sunny intervals possible later in the day. The strong northwest wind will back to the west and ease in the evening with a best temperature of around 10 degrees. Sunset tonight is at 18 minutes past 8 and sunrise tomorrow morning at 18 minutes past 6.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
If you run a small business or just need more room in the back, Philshore Vehicles has the perfect van or light commercial for all your needs and can sort out any finance. Based in the Tremode Estate, view philshorevehicles.im or call 49 51 49.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Bell-Dorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company, Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
SMS Trading have moved to 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all-island delivery and man-in-a-van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
At Begode Cattery, we have been caring for animals for over 50 years. As a cattery, we care for customers' cats and treat them as our own. Contact Begode Cattery on 676 947 or find Begode Cattery on Facebook.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
And it's just gone 5:05. The man behind a petition calling for a referendum on the island's proposed wind farm says it's not about being for or against renewable energy, it's about people having a say. John Anslow believes big decisions are being made without the public, pointing to new 20-mile-per-hour zones and the Liverpool ferry terminal as examples. Even Manx star Samantha Barks has backed the campaign, saying there should be a public vote. Mr. Anslow says it's about time the Manx public got a proper voice on projects like this.
It seems to me that more and more massive capital projects are being forced on us with no real opportunity for the electorate to comment. Recent examples including but not limited to the Liverpool shed, the 20-mile-an-hour zones and the wind farm. And this petition was really born out of the frustration that I and my acquaintances feel at not being listened to. Whether you consider it's a good idea or a bad idea isn't really the point of this petition.
Now, at the heart of your petition is a call for a public referendum. What would you hope such a vote would achieve beyond raising awareness?
If we have a referendum, then everyone has a chance to make their position felt. They don't agree with it, they not agree with it, they don't want to vote, they don't have to vote. But they then can't claim ignorance.
What would your response be to people who say that a referendum simply isn't practical right now because the referendum law on the Isle of Man dates back to the 1979 and would actually take a fairly substantial period of time to actually overhaul before anything was actionable?
Get it done.
That's John Anslow speaking to Christian Jones there. Well, Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas says if the island's outdated referendum law is modernised, it could give the public the power to call a vote on big issues like this. He's been working on updating the 1979 Act, but says progress has been slow as he's largely having to do it alone. Mr. Thomas is expected to ask for more time with the hope of bringing forward changes by the end of the year. But he's also reminded people that the Isle of Man is a representative democracy, not a referendum democracy.
There is a place for referendum. So in national British terms, it was only on things like constitutional change. In Ireland, they started doing referendum on stuff like abortion, and more recently across, we now have referendum at a local level about introducing mayors. We have referendum about increasing the council tax by more than a certain percentage. So there are all sorts of issues where referendum are becoming used, but we have to remember that primarily our system is a system of having elections from time to time. And I guess you're completely right. It could be that the public is dissatisfied that there's a lack of mandate for the politicians now, and they want the election to come along, and in the meantime they vent their disappointment through calling for referenda.
That's Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas there. 5:08. Isle of Man residents are being urged to learn more about autism and how to support those in the community with the disorder. April is Autism Acceptance Month. Lay members for the Autism Spectrum Condition Steering Group, Matt Quine and Jade Bolan, say there are often misconceptions about the condition.
April is traditionally, it's Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. I think the terms are kind of a little bit interchangeable nowadays. I think there's definitely a misconception that autism only really affects children, and it doesn't. You know, autistic children grow up to become autistic adults who join the workforce and have families of their own. So hopefully this month and every month really we can help raise awareness a bit about that.
The steering group is focused on the autism strategy that was released in March last year, I believe. So that is a 10-year strategy, but there's a lot of kind of focus in the background where to focus on is autism in the workplace. We don't have statistics for the Isle of Man, but in the UK, only about 1 in 5 people with autism diagnosis is in employment. So there is now going to be a sub-working group working on looking at what we can do on the Isle of Man.
It's a real problem, I think, everywhere that autistic people often really, really want to work. They really have a lot to contribute, but are often overlooked in employment, especially during sort of interview processes, application processes, that kind of thing. They can often be quite prohibitive. Because, I mean, you think of sort of job applications and they'll say, oh, we want a real sort of extroverted go-getter and a real team player. That, on paper, isn't going to apply to an awful lot of autistic people.
Because you guys are mentioning autism in the workplace, there is someone that I interviewed, because she's an adult, it's a bit harder for her to get that diagnosis. What can you guys tell me in terms of the work going on in the background to tackle adult diagnosis?
Yeah, that is a big problem on the island. I'm quite fortunate. I was diagnosed 10 years ago on the island. It was through National Health, Manx Care. Now, 10 years on, there isn't actually a pathway for diagnosis for adults on island unless they pay to go private. So it's definitely something we're pushing hard for at the steering group. But as Matt said, it is a 10-year strategy. So we're also aware that this isn't going to happen overnight.
That's Matt Quine and Jade Boland from the Autism Spectrum Condition Steering Group speaking to Chanel there. You can find much more on that story over at manxradio.com.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
We'll turn our attention to next week's local authority elections now, and a former Chief Minister standing to be elected to Castletown Commissioners says providing quality public services will be one of his priorities. Tony Brown, who was also the town's MHK for 30 years, hopes to carry out a review of all the parking in the town and keep Market Square open to vehicles during the winter months. Here he is speaking to local democracy reporter Emma Draper about the key issues on his manifesto.
Main things are clearly my commitment to the town, that I care about Castletown and the people of the town. I want to see Castletown successful. It's got a lot of heritage which is being ignored at the moment. Retailers and traders are struggling. Somebody needs to give a commitment to say, how do we resolve these problems? And we need to include people who are in the coalface of that to talk to them. Again, when I was in the Keys, I very much did this. And those skills I still have, and I hope that I can help it. I think the other thing that I'm concerned about is financial planning. I mean, where are we going as a town in terms of the rate money that comes from our ratepayers and where we budget our money? And should we continue to pay government for things that we have no say over? So I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of the planning, but very importantly is public services that the commissioners do provide being good for the town, maintaining what we have, our amenities to a high standard, not allowing things to fall to pieces. I mean, we have had a play area closed simply because it's not been maintained, and now they're investing tens of thousands of pounds to replenish it, whereas it could have been kept in good order. Castletown Commissioners has a lot of its own public sector housing, and continually I hear people criticising they can't get maintenance done to a proper level. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but if it's a problem, we need to try and resolve it, and we should be able to.
And what do you think are the most pressing problems facing Castletown residents at the moment?
One is to make sure that we have a successful town centre. If you don't have a proper town centre with proper retailing facilities and we don't coordinate the car parking and all the other facilities to make it work, then in fact the town suffers. And if we lose our retailing sector, then the town ceases basically to be a town. It's just a place with streets.
That was Tony Brown, who's standing to be a Castletown Commissioner in the upcoming local authority elections. The other candidates are Beth Cannon, John Kringle, William Galley, Alan Leonard, Colin Leather, Mahendra Kumar Patel, Carol Quine and Lawrence Watterson. Residents will be able to vote at Castletown Town Hall from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. on Thursday the 24th of April. The time now approaching 14 minutes past 5. The Treasury Minister says he's not seen any further interest for gas exploration in Manx waters in recent months. However, speaking on Manx Radio's Perspective programme with Phil Gaughan, Dr Alex Allinson doesn't think the idea is dead in the water.
You talked about Tynwald passing resolutions. Tynwald was quite clear at the start of this administration that there should be no new licences granted There was a licence granted, obviously, previously for exploration. For a range of reasons, that was never fully taken advantage for in terms of drilling and seismic surveys. I have yet to see anyone else coming forward to say we'd like to explore in your territorial waters, because the rest of the world has changed, and certainly in the United Kingdom now they're not granting new licences. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily dead in the water. I think there's still some interest there, but is anyone going to go in and spend the tens of millions of pounds to basically fund what could just be a speculative venture? Because there's gas down there, but is there enough to get out to make a profit? And we don't know, and nobody will know until somebody puts the money where their mouth is. I don't think that should be government. Personally, and to grant new licence, we'd have to take that back to Tynwald. But Tynwald can change its mind, and I think one of the other points you made was about Tynwald voting for various changes that have a financial consequence, or voting for various strategies that have quite a lot of financial consequences that can only be calculated after. We need to be quite clear with Tynwald members that everything has a cost, whether it's people's time or money. And we, as a parliament and as a government, need to respect that a lot of the things we do necessarily take money away from taxpayers, or take money from one part of the economy to go to another.
Treasury Minister Alex Allinson.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, let's head over to the roads. The mountain road is closed from Ramsey to the bungalow for TT preparation work. The closure will be in place 24 hours a day until no later than 5 o'clock on Thursday evening. Businesses on the mountain will be open as normal. Also this week, there'll be temporary lights at the bottom end of the mountain road between Cronknamona and Signpost Corner, 24 hours a day for meter replacement work. In Cueg, temporary lights on the Old Castletown Road near the brewery for wastewater upgrade work. In Farm Hill for the next couple of days, there are temporary lights on Vicarage Road at the roundabout with Meadow Crescent for work on the manhole covers. In Sulby, temporary lights at Sulby Bridge, 24 hours a day for resurfacing there. And in Ramsey until the 12th of May, temporary lights at the Bowring Road / Derby Road junction, 24 hours a day for gas main work. Over at the airport, a bit of a delay to the Loganair departure to Liverpool tonight due to the expected late arrival from Manchester. The 20:06 flight now expected to depart after 7 o'clock. And sailings now, the latest from the steam packet. The Manannan is due into Liverpool in around an hour's time. And Manxman has just left Heysham. She'll be back here around 8:45 tonight.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre with 1 year's free engine warranty from Castrol. Get more with Quayside. You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
And it's 17 minutes past 5. The Department of Home Affairs says it's looking at a range of options as alternatives to custodial sentences as the Isle of Man prison remains overcrowded. The Derby facility can accommodate 167 prisoners, but we've heard this month that number has reached 160. The figure was confirmed by Chief Officer Dan Davis whilst giving evidence to the Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Justice Committee this week. He was asked if the current level of overcrowding is sustainable.
In the short term, it is. The prison staff are doing an amazing job. So you know that the prison capacity is normally 143. With the additional 24 spaces we have, then that has given us the additional capacity. I do want to say that the men and women in the prison are doing a really remarkable job in incredibly difficult circumstances. Every single aspect of the prison is being tested, but I also think that the cooperation from prisoners is really important, and people in prison, it's not an easy position to be in when the prison's so full. So we are looking at a range of options. We're looking at a range of things like tagging disposals rather than custodial disposals. We're looking at additional wing for the prison in terms of a build for the prison potentially is an option. If you look at since probably April 23, the numbers have continued to increase, and we have 66 people, as the Minister said, on long-term sentences, and as you know, a long-term sentence under the Custody Act is 4 years or more. So there are 66 people in prison on a sentence of 4 years or more. So they will be there you'll have a cohort of 66 people who will be there for the foreseeable future. That issue isn't going to go away. So we need to ensure that we're using the appropriate disposal, back to Mr. Hooper's point, for the appropriate punishment.
That's Dan Davis, Chief Officer of the Department of Home Affairs, speaking to the Constitutional and Legal Affairs and Justice Committee this week. Now, another candidate standing in the upcoming local authority elections wants to try and tackle issues around dog waste in Peel and says she's open to ideas. Sharon Lambert, who's retired, says she'd like to see more transparency from the commissioners with its communication and would also be looking to improve its social media usage.
Well, I've been involved in doing certain things as a private resident for quite some time, and so I'm a lone person trying to do that, and now I want to actually see if I can get a board behind me to move things forward where I've failed to do so in certain instances as an individual. And I'm thinking as a group we can do more. I think we also need to review what we've got at the moment. What are our mission statements? Because the people that are standing, they're nearly all new people. There are 3 existing and then the rest are newbies. And so I would like to see, well, let's just have a relook at the vision and also our standing orders. That might be worth a review too. So that's to get our foundations in place. So we're all agreeing with those to begin with. And then the other things on my manifesto is the car parks and street parking. There's been discussions about motorhomes and things like that, and vans, and people that are parking in 1824, but they're actually parking there for months on end. When you have those kind of car parks, rotation, so everybody gets a go. Our main shopping area, quite a lot of closed shops there. It's looking a bit sad and tired. Central government have organised a town and village regeneration scheme. I'd like to see us taking full advantage of that. It's not just for the businesses in the street, it's also for amenities as well, because we've got potential, I think it's up to 50%, which central government will fund. And then something that drives the whole town crazy is Peel Poo Patrol. We really need to try and get that under some sort of way where we can stop it, clean up our streets.
That's Sharon Lambert, who's standing in the upcoming local authority elections in Peel. The other candidates are Katrina Baptist, Frank Crompton, Alistair Cubban-Wood, Stuart Hardingham, Ray Harmer, Christine Muckton and William Otieno Costain. 21 minutes past 5 now, and turn our attention to sport.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
And FC Isle of Man's manager insists the club is continuing to move in the right direction, despite another home defeat at the weekend. Following his side's 3-2 loss to Litherland Remacher on Saturday, Paul Jones says they know the areas they need to improve on going forward.
When we first came into the role, it was similar. There was lots of people kind of making silly mistakes, really, because they felt under a lot of pressure and they weren't handling it particularly well. We've got a much better structure now and shape and how we play. At the minute, the players just can't buy a win. You know, it's taken Litherland to score the own goal that they scored for us before we looked like we really believed we could go and win the game. And that's just, you know, where we are at the moment in the season more than anything else. So I've always said I believe in the players, I 100% do. It's been the end of a long season. And I think they're a pretty young, inexperienced group in the main as well. So, you know, I think it's part of their experience and learning and development to go through this.
This will be the last time you'll have played in front of your fans as well. It's been a disappointing run of results. You've made no bones about that, but you've got a loyal following of fans behind you. But the more cynical might wonder, well, how do we actually get to the next level? Where is the improvement? What would you say to all the fans about what you would like to do going into next season?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair shout, isn't it? Because they're looking at the results on the pitch, but and maybe at times we've been sidetracked by looking at the results rather than focusing on what we really need to do to improve. You know, it's clear we need to score more of the chances that we're creating, and it's clear that we need to do better at conceding, you know, relatively straightforward goals, and we think about that, we work on that, and you know, pre-season does give us an opportunity to really tighten up in some areas. We've started to talk to players about whether they're staying or going. It's not a recruitment model, this club. We can't be like a Bury or anybody else and bring in players who are better than what we've got from higher divisions. It very much is around helping to coach and develop and improve a group. I'd say judge us on what we did in the first half of the season and maybe less so the second half.
That's FC Isle of Man manager Paul Jones speaking to Manx Radio sports editor Rob Pritchard following the Manx side's 3-2 loss to Litherland Remacher on Saturday. We'll turn our attention to the rest of sporting action on the Isle of Man. Here's Darren Timpson. Faster my Darren.
Faster my Lewis. Starting with some TT news, the top 20 seeded riders for this year's Supersport race has been announced. Paul Jordan will be the first to lead off the line at Glencountry Road, followed by David Johnson. One of the early favourites, Dean Harrison, will fly out in third. In boxing, Isle of Man's Jade Burden has had her first fight of 2025 called off. The Grenade was due to be back in the ring later this month at Grand Central Hall in Liverpool. No reason has yet been given as to why the bout was cancelled. In tennis, the Isle of Man Open concluded on Sunday. In the men's, Manx player Mark Chin took on UK's number 3 seed Ben Miles. Mark took the opening set after a tie-break, but Miles fought back and was eventually crowned the winner by 2-1. On the ladies' side, number 2 seed Helen Miles comfortably beat Island junior Abigail Cowell 6-1 and 6-love in straight sets. In hockey, the Isle of Man Ladies B have made the final of the English Hockey Championships Tier 3 plate. They overcame Loughborough Students 5s by 3-1. Katie Eric and Ella Blackmore both scored to help the Island team on their way. They'll now face Sunburn and Walton Hawks in the final at the start of May. In athletics, Islander Sarah Webster was crowned the winner of the 24-hour track race in Crawley on Sunday. Webster came home first overall as she completed an impressive 608 laps. She walked a distance of 151.232 miles, 11 more than the second best. Elsewhere, Sarah Aston was in action over the weekend. Aston competed in the European Running Championships Brussels-Leuven 10km. She finished in a commendable 17th, just under 2 minutes behind the winner. And there's midweek football to look forward to over the next few days. On Tuesday, there's the kind of live Premier League action as Foxhill face St Mary's, while Ayr travel to St George's. And the Under-18s FA Cup final will take place on Wednesday as Ramsey face Russian at the Ball.
Darren Timpson, Gurmayed. That's it for Update Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Phil Gorn is along next with Agenda, and Chris Kinley is back at 6 o'clock with Greatest Hits. Stay tuned for that and have a great evening. Update will be back at the same time tomorrow.